Welcome to the Tech Humanist Show, a multimedia format program exploring how data and technology shape the human experience. I'm your host, Kate O'Neill.
But the idea of just like, you can be learning anywhere in the world and you can have this really deep physical and digital connection. So I think that's what gets really exciting, is the sense of place when you're building these augmented experiences or these extended reality experiences. You can be taking into account everything in the world, everything that is in your physical space, and augmenting it in a way that's really interesting and really ties to the location.
Today on the Tech Humanist Show, I'm thrilled to introduce Cortney Harding, a true visionary in the world of virtual and augmented reality. Cortney is the founder and CEO of Friends With Holograms, an award-winning agency that's pushing the boundaries of immersive experiences. Her work has earned accolades from Mobile World Congress and South by Southwest, and she's collaborated with industry giants like Walmart, Verizon, and Coca-Cola. While our conversation was recorded some time ago, Cortney's insights into the transformative power of VR and AR in fields like healthcare, education, and workplace training remain incredibly fresh and relevant. Her unique perspective on blending technology with human-centered design makes her an invaluable voice in our ongoing exploration of how emerging tech can enhance the human experience. So I have a bunch of questions that I'll kind of reference back to you, but I think it'll be just really interesting to just chat about, what your experience has been like, working with different companies on different projects. I'm specifically start us with VR and AR. What have been some of those projects that you've worked on, and what have been some of the challenges that you've had to overcome with them?
Yeah. So in terms of projects, the sort of project that got us started was with a large consulting company, and it was building a VR training piece for social workers. So helping them practice conversations with families in crisis. So it was a pretty intense, obviously, subject area. We were trying to do something that really hadn't been done before, and we were doing it on an incredibly short timeline. So, the challenge there was really learning everything very quickly. And also, we're a very small team. We don't have tons of resources. So we really had to hustle and learn as we were going. And of course, it worked out because that piece really launched us. It won Best VR at Mobile World Congress. It was a finalist for a South by Innovation Award. We did other pieces along that same topic. That piece is still living. It's in, I want to say almost 30 states at this point are using this technology and the pieces that we built to train social workers. So that's really impactful, really exciting. The thing I like about this stuff, honestly, is you are always learning. So I don't ever go into a project knowing exactly what I'm going to do. I kind of have a rough idea and an outline and a general understanding of the space and the technology. But from there, I'm definitely iterating and changing and experimenting. And, that's not something that the clients necessarily have insight into, but that's something we're doing on our end, is trying to make sure every project we do is pushing something forward, right? Whether it's using a new type of technology, whether that's artificial intelligence or natural language processing, whether that's using a new type of camera, a new type of storytelling device. So for us, it's really about, how can we take this technology that's evolving, shifting, and changing all the time, and sort of be working with it in real time and be learning in real time about it, which is always a little bit of a tightrope walk, but a fun one.
Yeah, I would imagine. It seems like, you're learning as you're going, you're iterating on what you've built before, I'm sure. And it also seems like, with this idea of pushing things forward, or always trying to look for ways to push that forward, is it that you're always trying to have some kind of social impact, or is it always that, are you thinking about the human experience, to use the parlance of the Tech Humanist Show, or what is the way in which you're thinking about pushing things forward? What's that reference?
So the vast majority of our work is social impact focused, but certainly, not all of it. We have done projects that are purely commercial, and those are just really fun. I wouldn't do anything that I considered socially negative, right? But certainly not everything has to have that social impact. We can do projects that are just fun and silly and exciting. But I think the human experience part of it is really what we are focused on. And it's always tweaking that, improving that, making that better, making it more, I don't want to say enjoyable, because some of the pieces we work on are not meant to be enjoyable, but they're meant to be impactful. right? So how can we create an experience that creates a feeling? And sometimes that feeling is one of discomfort or being challenged. I saw a playthrough of a piece that we just finished yesterday, and it was a piece on workplace bullying. And you don't go out of that, you don't exit that piece with a feeling of like joy. You exit that piece with a feeling of like, that was awful. And, you know, the thing that stuck with me so much with that piece is there's one actress we had in particular, great cast overall. One actress was like top tier. She's going to be a superstar in 5 years. So there's a line where you, the user, say something that you're really excited about, and this person who's kind of senior to you just looks at you and goes, oh, cool. Like she just brushes you off, and she does it so effortlessly and with such like ice cold venom. And I was watching it and I was just like, like, again, I co-wrote this piece. I worked on this piece. I was there when it was shot. Like I was working with the director. You know, none of this was a surprise to me, but being in headset and having that impact, I was just like, oh God, right? And I think that's what's really incredible about this stuff is the human experience that you can provide with this technology surpasses pretty much anything else that you can do.
Yeah, it's always so interesting to me because there seems like there's this interesting dance between understanding, you know, the empathy machine kind of aspect of VR and the limitations that, you know, when Caitlin Ugulik Phillips, who wrote the author of the future of empathy, no, the future of feeling, when she was on the show, we talked about, you know, in her research for the future of feeling about how VR as empathy machine did have its limitations because, you know, you aren't really in those experiences. You're putting it on for, you know, an hour and then you can walk away with the privilege of your life. And that there's those kinds of things. So how do you reconcile, you know, that sort of disconnect or the dance that you have to do between those two realities?
So our approach is a little different because I understand what she's referring to. And I've seen a lot of pieces like this where you are asked to essentially cosplay in VR. So you put on the headset and like, well, all of a sudden you're a black man, all of a sudden you're this person. We don't do that because I agree with her that putting on a VR headset does not undo, like I'm, you know, 42-year-old white woman. Putting on a VR headset does not undo that, right? So what we do is we meet people where they are. You come into one of our experiences, you are coming as yourself. Right? We did a piece for store employees on racial bias training. You come in as a customer, right? Which is an experience that everyone's had. When you come into our pieces on like workplace inclusion, workplace bullying, you come in as an employee, right? That's an experience that adults have, right? So a lot of what we're trying to do is create the sense that like you are feeling this as yourself. And that's infinitely more powerful than you being asked to play a character, right? So I think that's where the real difference is, and the real sort of formula that we've unlocked is if you meet people on their level, you meet them where they are, that's where they get the impact. It's not when they're asked to play a different role, because she's exactly right, it's not going to work.
So then when we think about, you know, the metaverse and the potential for, you know, creating new kinds of experiences and dimensionalizing new kinds of experiences in the metaverse, what do you think about the opportunity to assume avatars that are fictional to you, that are different from the reality that you live every day? What do you think that adds to our experience?
That adds a lot. So there's a couple, and I just taught a class on this with Barnard, which was just a mind-bendingly cool experience because the students were so brilliant. And they're younger. They are generally sort of the 18 to 22 age range. And so they are very native to this technology, right? They are Fortnite people. Their younger siblings or the kids they babysit for are Roblox people, which is huge. And I think that's going to be a really big shift as we move forward. So they're much more native to this, right? And when we talked about that, we came up with a bunch of different things. And the first is this case study that I've shared a lot, which is there was an organization, and I have to anonymize who it is, but basically they did this test where they put 10 people from every level of the organization in a simulation, right? So it was C-suite down to interns, everyone in between. Everyone's avatar was like something very silly. I think it was like a pink rabbit or something, right? So silly and anonymous. Everyone was numbered 1 to 10 randomly, and everyone's voice was put through a voice changer, so you sounded like you were in witness protection. So what that did was and then they had a problem solving exercise. And what this did was it enabled everyone to contribute equally. Because if you're in a meeting or a Zoom call or whatever, and you're an intern and the CEO, CMO, whoever is in this meeting, there's no way you're speaking up, right? You're scared, you're intimidated, and that person may or may not take you seriously, even if you do speak up. So what this did was it just completely leveled the playing field. They had this amazing experience. They solved this problem in a really creative way. And then it was kind of the big reveal was, oh, the people who actually came up with this were this really diverse group of people ranging from interns up to the top. And I think that was a real lesson and a real moment. And I think that's the type of thing you can do very easily in the metaverse. There's a lot of conversation right now about avatars and kind of the ethics of avatars too. So, it's one thing to say, oh, I want my avatar to have like a purple mohawk because I can't do that in person. I work at a bank, but it's fun. And, but then you start to get into this gray area of like, how accurately do you have to represent yourself? And we talk about digital blackface, which obviously is not okay. But there's a lot of gray area in between. And then we also get into these interesting ideas around like fandoms in the metaverse and how fandoms are expressed in the metaverse. And if you are acting as a character in the metaverse, whether that's a, Star Wars character or a celebrity, with Star Wars characters, they're clearly fictional. So that's kind of its own thing. But with a celebrity, even if you are like, you have to be honest that you are not actually them, you're just acting as them. But I think from like the fandom community, that makes things really, really interesting. So this is where we get to like spin out and be kind of weird with this stuff. But I do think this is going to be a big issue in a few years. Like digital verification, avatar verification is going to be the next level of how we sort of control the metaverse.
Yeah, and if we can't even make sense of blue check marks on Twitter, it sounds kind of daunting. What the story you bring up, which is fantastic, makes me think of two follow-up ideas, and they're related, trust and governance. And so because that story seems like it wouldn't work if the participants at every level didn't trust that they were truly anonymized, or that there wasn't some sort of backdoor that would make them accountable for speaking their truth or speaking up and participating in the meeting. So how do we establish that trust? And from a governance perspective, where this seems like it's most valuable in that sort of an example is in kind of toxic environments otherwise. And so how can we think about governance in environments that can benefit the most, that are already toxic and probably don't have the kind of governance to roll something like this out appropriately?
Yeah, that's a tough one. So I think in this situation, because it was kind of an experiment, people just had headsets shipped to their houses and they kind of trusted the process. This wasn't going to be some sort of gotcha question or something nefarious happening. But you raise a really good point, which is, how do we build trust in the space? And so I think some of that is just being very transparent about like privacy, how much privacy you have, what sort of data is being collected, all of that stuff I think is very important. I think to the earlier point, digital verification of your identity is very important. And I think that, when it comes to governance, there's a lot of questions about like, where does the metaverse live in terms of like whose laws govern it? So the example that's sort of famous about Twitter and social media is if you set your location on Twitter to Germany, your experience will be very different because Germany has very, very strict hate speech laws, right? So, is that going to be the same in the metaverse? If you set your location to Germany, you're going to have a different experience. The other thing with the metaverse is it's all real time, it's all conversational. So how are we governing it? How are we sort of moderating it? Because you can't have a moderation system like you have now with social media in the metaverse. It's just not possible. So what we focus on is like community governance, right? It's community building. It's almost like Reddit is weirdly a good example of this because Reddit has these very established communities that kind of police themselves. And so building out spaces in the metaverse that are essentially self-policed and empowering people to do that and making sure that there are community guidelines so you can have a free and open exchange of ideas. But at the same time, people aren't, using hate speech or threats or, dangerous rhetoric. And, one big concern about the metaverse, honestly, that I have and that a lot of people have is, there's at least some sort of policing and accountability that can happen when you have sort of hate groups online because it's all written down, right? It's physical, it exists, or digital anyway. But when you're thinking about the metaverse, it's just, conversations back and forth, and those are ephemeral. So I think that's where it gets a little scary, to be totally honest, is while there's so much opportunity to do amazing things and connect with people, there is a real worry that, we're going to see hate groups expanding in the metaverse and we're not going to be able to do much about it.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it also seems, you brought up a really interesting point about, the example of setting your location to Germany and having a completely different experience, and made me, I want to follow up on that point as well. And it kind of comes back to the hate groups idea. It's the notion of the ways in which the metaverse conceptually dovetails with place in a physical sense, and the ways in which it does not. But the ways in which it dovetails with place, you bring up a really great example of the physical governance applying wherever you are, as you participate in an environment. What are some of the other ways you think about physical place shaping the virtual experiences or the metaverse experience that we might have?
Well, so that's where augmented reality and extended reality really comes into play, because the new Meta headset, the Quest Pro, which was launched last year and is going to launch in a new version later this year, that has what's called pass-through. So you can be in an experience that is fully immersive and then step outside of it and see essentially your world. And what you can do is build experiences that are then really deeply connected to the physical world. So I'll give you an example. There was a demo build that I went through that was incredible, and it was a CPR demo. So you were wearing a headset, you were in a space, and you had a physical CPR dummy in front of you. That had a digital overlay. So the person who's training you is an avatar. They can be anywhere in the world as long as they've got their headset on. They can see what your avatar is doing, but you as a person are actually working on this dummy that's in front of you. So again, it was pretty simple, and it was a demo, so it wasn't perfect, but the idea of just you can be learning anywhere in the world and you can have this really deep physical and digital connection. So I think that's what gets really exciting, is the sense of place. When you're building these augmented experiences or these extended reality experiences, you can be taking into account everything in the world, everything that is in your physical space, and augmenting it in a way that's really interesting and really ties to the location. So I see a lot of augmented reality experiences that are disconnected to locations, and I'm like, why? You could have just made this a website. It would have been easier and it would have saved you money.
That's such a
right?
great line. I know that's going to show up in an episode somewhere. You could have just made this a website.
That's the thing. I'm like, why? Why is this AR? It doesn't have to be AR, right? If it connects to if there's a physical object, a soda can or something, and something comes off the soda can and it's part of it, that's cool, that's interesting. I mean, it has to have a point, it has to have a narrative and a story, but at least that's something. What I see a lot of the time is these things are just kind of untethered from the physical space, and I'm just you're missing this huge opportunity to do something really interesting. So my hope is that as this technology moves forward, and Apple's going to put out a headset in 2 months, and it's going to be something, it's probably going to be pretty good, or the start of something pretty good. And my hope is that really pushes this forward, and people can think more intentionally about what are the stories we want to tell that are place-based.
Yeah, for sure. It's always, to me, AR is the mega opportunity. I think of VR, I think of all of the wonderful experiences that can be had in VR. But to me, it's always been AR that makes the back of my neck tingle and then go oh, there's so much potential there. And that's exactly why the sort of pass-through experiences, the way that it could be used for training and so on, like the CPR example you gave. But I also wanted to ask you about, when you think about VR or AR or, XR, metaverse, however you want to break it down, what role do you see that playing in the future of entertainment? Since I know that you are a bit of a music head yourself. When you think about music, entertainment, gaming, that seems like the gaming is obviously the main area or the main development space, I think, for a lot of VR case studies. But what are some particular genres or formats that you think lend themselves particularly well to these technologies and to what's going to be coming out in the coming years?
So the challenge that I think a lot of people in music are having right now is, and this is honestly a challenge that most people are having, it's not just music, is they're thinking very linearly about this stuff. So, I've seen so many startups or projects that are just like, it's a concert in VR. And I'm like, okay, sure. Again, why? Why? What's the point? Like, I could watch this on my giant flat screen TV and it would probably be just as good of an experience, if not potentially better. So one thing that I really liked was The Weeknd did something in, I forget the platform, but The Weeknd did this really cool concert, but it wasn't really a concert. It was like an animated version of him. And it was just this like cool, almost like music video experience, but it was interactive and you could like vote on things. Now, whether the voting was real or not is debatable, but it was just different. It was a whole new type of a thing. And I really liked that because I feel like, again, when people are confronted with new technologies, they default to like, let's just take what we already do and just stick it in this new format. Right. And so with music and with art, there's so much else that can be done. And I feel like people are just starting to scratch the surface. So I love the idea of AR interactivity in live concerts. I've seen that before. That can be really cool, right? Everyone's already watching this show through their phone anyway, right? Why not make something really interesting happen? Thinking about like what types of immersive experiences you can build, how can you spend an artist's brand, to spin out their art, meld it with other technologies. Like there's a lot of cool stuff that can be done. And I think one challenge is really getting people to think outside of the like, let's take this thing that exists and plonk it into this other format, right? And I have a whole keynote that I give on this, which is basically, when the internet first started, it was literally just like PDFs on web pages. People didn't think about that until, later. When social media first started, it was just brands putting information on their social media platforms. They didn't develop brand voices on social media until much later. So I think in the metaverse, we're at that stage where like clothing brands are like, we're going to make a store in the metaverse. And it's like, okay, that's not terrible. It's a cool way to start, but you can go so much further. Like in the metaverse, you can fly, like you can do all this cool stuff. Why are you just being like, we're going to do an H&M except digital? Okay.
Right. You could have just made a website.
Yeah, you could have just made an interactive store and like, great. So I think like brands are just really stuck right now. And so that's one thing that I work on is really helping them understand like, what else can we be doing?
Yeah. I think one of the things that I've talked about with executive leaders for a long time is that when you think about digital transformation of any sort, the wrong place to start is with the technology. If you start by thinking about the cloud, then and like what's our cloud strategy, you're guaranteed to end up somewhere completely meaningless. But if you start from a provocative, interesting question that relates to what your actual business purpose is or what you're trying to achieve or accomplish with the people who you interact with, then you stand a really good chance of getting somewhere interesting. So I wonder, in your work, is there a provocation or a set of clarifying questions that you encourage people to ask? Is there a starting point that you can share with our audience to help them think about new ways to approach VR and AR and the metaverse in general?
Yeah. So when I start with a new client, the first thing I always ask is, how do you want the user to feel at the end of the experience? Because that to me is the most important thing. We can work on like, what are the KPIs? What are they trying to learn? What are you trying to sell? That stuff is all sort of solvable, right? But the thing I want to understand is like, what do you want the experience to be? How do you want people to feel when they take off the headset or put down the phone or log off the experience? Like, and that's where I sort of start, and then I work backwards from there. So, again, some of these training experiences we do, we want people to feel uncomfortable and freaked out and angry, right? That's what we're trying to teach them. We're trying to give them that feeling, that emotionality. For some of these metaverse worlds we're building, we want them to feel excited. We want them to feel like part of a community. And I think that's the thing that gets overlooked so much when people talk about metaverse and building worlds. The actual technical side of it is not irrelevant. Obviously, it needs to be functional. It needs to look good. But you can build something that like looks great. And if there's no reason for people to come. So I'll pick on this one brand, and I won't name them by name, but it's a fast food brand. And they built a space in the metaverse. And it looked fun. It looked cool. There were some games. There was a replica of the restaurant. So I went on the first day, and there were people in there because they'd gotten a lot of press. And then I went back 2 days later, and I was one of 2 people in there. And then I went back a week later, and there were like digital tumbleweeds floating through. And the mistake they made is they didn't give us a why. There was no reason to go. There was no reason to go again. There was no community. There was no interaction. So like, these are kind of basic things. And I feel like people who know how to build communities, they do this on Discord or they do this on social media, like they just haven't been resourced into the metaverse as of yet. Brands just want to build a thing and then walk away from it. And it's like not that easy. You need to invest, you need to build community. And I think that's also a really critical part of it is you need to think about like what type of community you're trying to build and what type of experience you're trying to give people.
I wanted to ask, because I know you teach. And so I wanted to ask you, when you have the opportunity to guide young people, and you must hear from some who are eager and interested in the space. What advice can you offer to those who are interested, who might be listening or whose parents may be listening? What skills and experiences do you think are important for people trying to enter the field?
So I would say, right now it's a hard time because, tech companies are going through a lot of churn. Meta obviously is having a lot of layoffs. There's a lot of uncertainty in the space. So, it's hard for me to tell young people like dive in head first because right now the market's not fantastic. I do think that will turn around. I hope it will turn around because I have no other useful skills. So I'm going to be working at Starbucks if it doesn't turn around.
Or you could work at the fast food place in the metaverse.
I could be a waitress in the metaverse. I was a terrible waitress in real life, so maybe I could be an okay waitress in the metaverse. But my advice to my students is like just build stuff because there are not that many jobs right now that will teach you how to do this stuff. So what you really want to do is like get a 360 camera or use a platform like there's a platform called Spatial. Spatial is fantastic. It's free. There's a $25 a month premium version, which you can get if you want to, but you don't really need to unless you want to do custom stuff. So get Spatial, sign up for an account, build a world, invite your friends, do something cool. And like, that's where you want to get started or get a 360 camera, shoot some stuff, put it in headset, learn about it. Like these are low cost, relatively ways to get started. And I think the way you get in is really sort of building a portfolio on your own. And then going from there.
As you think about the ethical considerations of AR and VR and as the technology becomes more sophisticated, more immersive, we talked a little bit about governance already, but what do you think some of the big ethical concerns are? What are the considerations? What should creators and companies working in the space be thinking about?
There's a lot, right? And I think we've touched on some of this earlier. So the first big consideration is, verification, right? So are people who they say they are, making sure that you are creating a safe community. So making sure that people have the ability to police themselves, making sure that users can speak up. There's a lot of, things you can build in. So like, there's bubbles around people right now, virtual bubbles. So like another avatar can't come up to you and like touch you without your consent. So there's that type of stuff. There's, making sure that these are, safe, quote unquote, safe spaces so people can be in them free of harassment. So I think there's definitely that. I think there's also an accessibility issue, right? So making it accessible for people with different abilities, whether that's people that have limited vision, limited hearing. These are things that can be built in. I think another big issue is accessibility around the world. So there was a tweet that I saw recently, and again, I don't think this was scientific, so I can only get so far with it. But it basically was like sentiment analysis around the metaverse. Who was the most positive? Who's the most negative by geography? All of the groups that were the most positive were in the developing world. All of the groups that were the least positive were in like the West. So I think but if you look at where headsets are available, it's in the West. If you look at where this technology is mostly available, it's in the West. So making sure that we're on like equal footing in terms of getting this in front of the people that are excited about it, right? I think in the West, we have this weird fear of technology sometimes, whereas people who are in developing markets are excited about this stuff. Like it's really fascinating to see. If you look at like, who's using digital currency, it's not so much in the West, right? Like there are still places in New York City that are cash only. If you go to like Nigeria lost a bunch of their cash somehow, and it didn't matter because like people just use mobile pay for everything, right? Whereas in the US, if you couldn't use cash, like entire businesses would shut down. So I think really making sure that there is that accessibility for folks who, want to participate in this.
I was kind of thinking just to offer you a free space to talk about what you think are the coolest things that you've seen in this, like what's coming, what's emerging, what are some, sort of out there projects that you have seen or have your eye on or conceive of, or, I mean, you obviously wouldn't want to share what the ones that you conceive of if you think you might take them on, but yeah.
Oh no, I want to share this one. Michigan asked me to do a talk on AI and XR. And so I was like, all right, how do I come at this from a different angle? And then I was like, what do I want out of this? Right. And I think what I would love to see created, and I'm going to try to create this at some point, I hope, is everyone talks about large language models. I want a small language model, and I want a small language model that is specific to myself. So you and I are both people who have, you more so than me, have so much stuff out there, right? Videos of talks, stuff we've written, stuff we've produced, all of this stuff. And it's not really doing much for us at this point. Like it is there, it is on the internet, but it's not working for us on a day-to-day basis. So what I want to do is create an avatar that is me, based entirely off of everything that I have already put out into the universe, and let that avatar do the work for me. So if that avatar can be the one networking, selling, talking to different people, I can be in a hammock on the beach with a Mai Tai and a good book, right? It's the Huck Finn thing. It's like I'm convincing my avatar to do the work for me while I go relax. And I really think this could be interesting because what this could do is like shorten the sales cycle, right? So you're not dialing for dollars, your avatar is doing it. And then once your avatar and this other avatar have like a hit, then that's where the humans can take over. But I think you could like outsource a lot of your work to your avatar. So I would love to have my avatar like call customer service for me, make appointments for me, deal with it in my doctor's office for me. Like all this stuff my avatar could be doing, and it isn't yet. So that's my goal, is to really use that technology to build an avatar version of myself that I can be like, I don't want to do this, you do it. It's like a virtual assistant type of avatar, but powered by my own record of stuff. So that's what's really interesting to me right now, is can I actually make this happen in some meaningful way?
Do you own, follow-up question, do you own huckfin.ai as a domain? Because I think you should.
Yeah, I think I'm going to be buying that once we're off this call.
And isn't it, I mean, in some ways, it sounds like, I can't remember the name of Google's assistant that they have, for calling up restaurants and stuff like that. I mean, you can ask ChatGPT, for example, to write in the style of yourself. You can have Google's AI like call and make reservations for you. So it seems like some of this functionality exists in bits and pieces here and there, but you're more just talking about cobbling it together as one cohesive, per person kind of approach.
Yeah, and having it literally be plug and play, right? Like you put your name in. Now, obviously, if your name is Jane Smith, it's going to be a lot harder, right? So then you're going to have some sort of like filtering mechanism to make sure it's your stuff as opposed to somebody else's.
It's pretty hard with Kate O'Neill, believe it or not.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm lucky that my name is spelled differently. My parents were, visionaries, giving me an SEO friendly name before anyone knew what SEO was, I guess. That's what I joke with them. But yeah, I mean, it's the type of thing that will take time to build for sure. But the component parts are sort of all there. Nobody's just figured out how to put them together in a way that is plug and play. So all you do is you just like sign up, you connect your avatar, it scrapes the web for all your stuff, and then it kind of comes up with it. And that's, again, like that to me is I think the future. And, it's the type of thing where like, think of how much more you could get done if you didn't have to waste your time doing these things that your avatar could be doing, right? Whether that's making restaurant reservations, calling the pharmacy, calling your doctor's office, schedule, like digging through leads on LinkedIn, right? Like all of this stuff could be so easily outsourced to this virtual person that is you. So that's what I'm really excited about. That's what I'm really thinking of.
I love it. And it makes me wonder though, so second follow-up question to that idea is, where are you on, universal basic income or, this sort of thing? Is that the model that you favor, or is there another model that you think makes the most sense as we think about, sort of replacing our productive contributions?
Yeah, no, I'm very pro universal basic income. I'm a democratic socialist. Like, I'm very pro everyone having healthcare, everyone having some sort of, basic standard of living. If you look at like Norway as a great example, like Norway, obviously some people have more money than others, but even if you work at Burger King in Norway, your life experience is like respectable, decent. You can have a pretty good life, right? Your basic needs are met. And obviously if you're a tech CEO in Norway, then you do more fun stuff, but everyone at least has that basic level. And I think, we as a society are so wedded to like work and productivity, and there's this cult of work that we've had for so long. And I think it's work, and all the articles about like AI is going to replace us. Very few of them had this positive spin of like, yeah, cool. AI can do all the stuff we don't want to do. We can do the stuff we want to do. We can create, we can be focused on more interesting things, higher ordered thinking. And then we don't have to worry about that other stuff. And I think there's a way to build out a world in which that's not a negative, that's a positive. And this will create more jobs, right? I mean, this will create new streams of work and new things. And, there's going to be a metaverse influencer economy. There's going to be a metaverse design economy. Like, all of these economies are going to exist and get built up. But I think, I gave a commencement speech at an art school in Mexico last year. And what I said to the students was, I was like, you need to always be thinking about like what's next, and you need to be open to change, right? Because if you're not open to change, like where people get stuck is they're not open to change. They're like, I've worked in the factory for 40 years and I'm always going to do this. And it's like, you can't, and that's okay. You can like learn and grow and shift and change. And we don't have an openness to that right now. And I think we need to be cultivating that so that people can be more open to these new technologies coming in and look at it from like a positive angle versus a negative angle.
Well, that's a great note to end on. Thank you for listening to the Tech Humanist Show. This episode was produced and edited by Thrive Loud Productions, with research by Ashley Robinson and Aaron Daughtry of Interrobang. You can find more information about the show's guests and links to their projects at thetechhumanist.com, where you can also find more episodes, or you can subscribe at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Special thanks to all of our guests for lending their voices to help make the future a brighter place. I'm Kate O'Neill. You've been listening to the Tech Humanist Show from KO Insights.